I'll start. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural edition of YHB TV, which is your handmade business TV. TV, I guess.
Broadcasting on all channels.
Yeah, right. We are doing this after basically a week of our holiday shape up, and we thought this is so much fun. We should try doing this basically once a week now. So this is what you guys got. You guys get us once a week now, every Thursday, 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll go over some of what the resources we've been talking about, our theme for each month, things like that. So yeah, you got anything else on this, Isaac?
Well, Sharon, I feel like some people may have no idea who these talking heads are. So who are you and who am I?
Yeah, right. Well, hopefully if you're here, you know that this is Academy of Handmade, and my name is Sharon Payne, and this is Isaac Watson. I am the founder of Academy of Handmade, and recently have started working with Isaac after his endeavor with a similar maker group. And so we have joined forces for about a year now. And we're all about helping makers in their business through community and support, and sort of looking at your business from like a zoomed out perspective. That is what I think we really focus on, and like charting that sustainable path in your business. So my background is specifically, before I started working with makers and in this community, is in PR and marketing and branding and media. So that is where I come from. I don't know if what about you, Isaac? That's all I can think to talk about me.
Well, like Sharon said, I used to have a maker support organization as well. I've been with Academy of Handmade now for almost a year. I can't officially. I mean, we were in lengthy discussions for about 6 months prior to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like we're at the year mark of unofficiality.
Yes.
If you want to count it from then. So
yeah, that's true. But I also used to have my own maker business, which I do no longer have. I ran that for 3 years, making one-of-a-kind jewelry. And so I have a lot of experience from that. And I've worked with makers in various capacities, and artists and creative people generally for the last 9 years. Wow, it's been a long time. So we both have a lot of experience to pull from. Academy of Handmade as an organization offers resources, programs, all kinds of great stuff. We have a fantastic community and a private forum for people who participate in our forums. And I think that probably covers it. Of course, if you have any questions about what we do, please ask, and we would be happy to answer them. Yeah. So you want me to talk a little bit about our themes, Sharon?
Yeah. Go ahead and introduce sort of kind of like the format of how we're going to be kind of doing this a little.
Yeah. So when I came on board officially to Academy of Handmade in January, we launched the Your Handmade Business podcast. And coupled with that is the Your Handmade Business newsletter. So I host the podcast, and it's a short format based around a kind of an essay on a subject, followed up by an edited interview with a maker sharing their experiences. And Sharon authors the newsletter. And what we decided when we set out to do the podcast and newsletter was that we would have a monthly theme that to some extent dovetailed with the maker business cycle. And that monthly theme would break down into 2 subtopics that we would address in each podcast and newsletter, which they come out every other week, so 2 a month. So as we started doing more and more of these live videos for promoting our programs and in this holiday shape up series that we did, we decided, was that last week that we did that? Or was that 2 weeks ago?
That was last week.
Feels like it was a month ago.
How is it the middle of October right now, guys? I don't even want to think about it because
Wow.
Panic coming for December.
Anyway, as we decided to, as we learned through these live videos, which we really enjoy doing, we figured, hey, we could take those themes and apply them to these weekly episodes. And I should also add that in our private community, in our forum, we have weekly discussion topics that are also based on our monthly themes. So our thought here is that each month we'll create a series of weekly episodes, live video episodes, TV episodes, if you will, and address subtopics within our larger theme and answer your questions and focus. I think YHB TV will be focused a little bit on a little more on practical help than some of the more conceptual or inspirational topics that we tend to cover in the podcast and newsletter.
It'll also be obviously like a lot more interactive, so you guys can ask questions, things like that. And I think that's a big reason why we wanted to do this, is that this is an outlet where we actually felt like we could get good discussion with you guys. If you are watching this on Facebook, of course you can ask questions, but I would really encourage you to go to our Crowdcast and sign up there, and it signs you up for the whole month of episodes that we're going to be doing. And then that way you can engage and also ask questions there. It's a little bit more dynamic on the Crowdcast, which if you're in here right now, we have a poll. So it's right below here, it says polls. We are asking if we should include music on this. And so that is our first whimsical poll that we are doing. Maybe we'll throw up a more serious one later, but if you want to go ahead and answer that, someone's already asked a question, so that's awesome, and we will get to that in a little bit as well too. So this month's theme that we've kind of are dealing with in the newsletter and on the podcast is determined, and what kind of came out this week is the I guess the anti-motivational poster. Do quit your daydream. And so we kind of decided to talk out of that basically today on sort of the things that get in the way of our success and that we kind of put up on ourselves. And like this is not like things that get away in success, like I don't have the money or things like that. Like there's like literally external things that are getting in the way of stuff sometimes in our business that we don't really have a lot of power over. But there are certain things that we do in our business where we are literally putting up the blocks to keep us from success sometimes. And Isaac and I we struggle with this sometimes too. Like, why did we make this rule on ourselves that like we couldn't do X, Y, or Z? Like what's even the point of that? So we get it. We get what what happens. So this week in the newsletter, my whole thing was that I think daydreaming is actually a thing that we do to get in the way of our success. I think a lot of times a daydream is a way for us to go into this perfect world and sort of just like leave all of that perfection. And I'm guilty of this too, like not wanting to like bring something to bear in our lives and actually make it happen and start working on that, because and especially if you've ever done anything in business, I think it can actually, I think, scare you a little bit more. Like, the reality of taking a daydream into a reality, and that is messy. So I think a lot of times we will have these daydreams and we'll kind of go there and we will keep them there and not act on them because we are wanting to keep this sort of like protected world of perfection happening. So that's one thing that I definitely think is keeping us in the way of success, is like not acting on those things and using them as a way to escape. And what about you, Isaac? What do you sort of see in the things that we put in front of ourselves to keep us from success?
There are a lot of things. I mean, I would agree with everything that you said. I think there are a couple other things that I see pretty commonly, especially for makers, because of the way that our the way that our businesses are structured and the way that our community supports itself is really unique. And it can be really helpful sometimes, but it can also be kind of distracting and throw up some hurdles to get in the way of our success. So there are a couple of things that I was thinking about, like sometimes we just get in the habit of saying yes without really thinking through some of the ramifications of what saying yes actually means. So if you're constantly saying yes, yes, yes to every opportunity that comes your way, but not really thinking through how you're going to execute on that commitment, or how saying yes to something is going to affect your business, that can actually put up a hurdle. You may feel like, saying yes to every craft show, or saying yes to lots of custom work on Etsy or whatnot is a success in and of itself. But over the long haul, it might actually be more of a roadblock than a boon. So I think I would caution against watching out for that. Another thing that I was thinking of
Can I just add to that before you go?
Yeah, sure.
I think if you get down to it, though, why people say yes to everything is like that's a fear issue, right? And so like the root of that fear is the fear of missing out, that like somehow, right, like this opportunity is never going to come along again, that the opportunities that you've already said yes to are not enough. So it's definitely, I think, a fear and insecurity thing when we say yes to things when we already know in our gut that we have too much on our plate, like that this isn't, or it's not the best fit, or that we don't have enough security and belief in the path, or have even really thought about the path in our business and forward and what's going on forward. So, I mean, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. I think going right along hand in hand with saying yes without really thinking about it would be trying to do all the things in your business at the same time. It's really easy to get caught in the trap of feeling like you need to post 3 times a day on Instagram and send out a weekly newsletter and reach out to new wholesale accounts 5 a week, or the list goes on and on and on, because as a business owner, especially as a solo business owner, everything is your responsibility. But going after all the things all the time can actually hold you back, because you're not able to focus on the right things you need to be working on in a way that helps you make progress, and prioritizing what's important right now versus what you can work on in the future, or what's not important enough to work on at all.
And I think that's so important too, because I think a lot of times growth comes in points where we see that we need to grow and we have to pull back on certain areas so that we can like push forward and grow in others. And then you can come back to those other things. But I think a lot of times people think that growth equals like this, when growth sort of equals this plateau, down a little, back up, So I think the line is definitely not that. And I think a lot of times you can get so used to, a certain place in your business that you're like, okay, I don't need to actually do this thing right now because I actually need to be growing. And in order to grow, I might need to ignore whatever it is for a month or something in order to get yourself to the place where you can, expand or get bigger or whatever. And I think that's a lot too. Like we had this discussion, I think, about hiring people at Craftcation last year. And I think that happens a lot when you hire somebody, is that you have to train them. It's not like, oftentimes it feels like they are oftentimes in the beginning, like it should not feel like that all the time, but in the beginning when you're working with somebody and, they're not doing it exactly like you want. So it feels like a step back. And then you're having to spend time to train them. So you're really like losing a lot in the beginning, you're going backwards when you hire someone. But the whole point is that you invest that loss in the beginning so that you can grow, after that point. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, if you guys have any questions as we're doing this, feel free to continue ask, and we'll kind of get to it at the end. We should do a shout out to Amanda Siska from Bread and Badger, who was here. And then Erwin is also here from, is it Little Fox? Little Golden Fox. Little Gold Fox. Little Gold Fox. There was a little and a fox in there, and I wasn't sure how they all went together. So Erwin is also in here too.
We forgot to mention too, Sharon, you are based in Los Angeles.
Oh, yes. And
I am in the Portland, Oregon area. I'm actually technically in Vancouver, Washington, which is the redheaded stepchild of a suburb. But I love it. And so, we're West Coasties, but we like makers everywhere.
This is true. So anyways, little break to let you guys know a little bit about us and say hello. Oh yes, Erwin said Little Gold Fox. So
there was one.
Erwin is also in the West Coast, and so is Amanda. Yeah. Is Erwin also in Portland?
Yeah, they both are.
Okay, both in Portland. Jeez, everyone in Portland coming out today.
I tell you, Portland represents on the live video.
This is true.
It's because it's disgusting outside. We're all inside on our computers.
Okay.
There was one final point I wanted to make, if I may. I think going back to us getting in the way of our own successes. And again, this is related to the first two things I mentioned, but the idea, and I struggle with this all the time myself, is ADD within your business. And this, like I said, this goes
shiny object syndrome.
Yeah. Shiny object syndrome. It's really easy to get distracted by whatever's tugging at your sleeve. Even if you're being really good about not doing all the things all the time, your business is constantly demanding your attention. Your social media is demanding your attention. It's so easy to get distracted. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I think can stand in the way of our success is our inability to focus on what's going to make the biggest difference in our business.
Definitely. So I think opposite of Isaac's saying yes to everything, which is kind of a doing things from the gut, I think there's also a other end of the spectrum of that, which I don't think these are mutually exclusive, which is over analyzing and overthinking the situation, which leads to analysis paralysis, which I think, so when I was doing my master's degree and writing the dissertation, the big encouragement that you would always get is that at some point you just kind of have to, you've done enough research, right? You have to kind of just write the thing at a certain point. You could just research for the rest of your life, on any given subject. You could literally do anything to sort of keep analyzing the situation until you try to figure out that it's perfect and it's ridiculous. And maybe this is an illustration that might help some of you, but I don't know if anybody else watches The Big Bang Theory. But the other night's episode with Sheldon and Amy getting married, and Sheldon is determined to find the perfect date, which then basically, obviously prevents them from finding any date, which is, the ongoing hilarity of that show. But I think something that makers struggle a lot with is, trying to figure out what the perfect end result of a product might be, or the perfect way to launch something, so that they just don't do anything to kind of launch, or it keeps you from actually executing and moving forward sometimes, if you're too stuck on and which is not to say, don't iterate, don't try to make stuff better, but there's the perfect being the enemy of good. And I think that can happen a lot, is that, there can be an over harshness sometimes on ourselves to make something perfect. Otherwise it's junk and we just can't deal with it or do anything with it. So Erwin says, I like the phrase, imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. I think that is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. So
I think it kind of goes back to the concept of a minimum viable product. You know, in the big business world, a minimum viable product is the bare minimum that you can do to get something out to market so that you can market test it and then iterate on that product. And it, you know, it's something that they use a lot in the software world too, and even all kinds of stuff. But, you know, think if you ever find yourself hung up on, you know, just waiting until something's just right to push it out there or to start, think back to what the minimum viable product is. I mean, it's quite possible that Sharon and I could have had YHB TV idea and like waited for 3 years until we were in the same location and had fancy camera equipment and like a studio and an audience or something. Like, you know, this is not Oprah. So we're just going to get here on our webcams with live video and we're just going to do this, because how else are you going to find out if it's a good idea?
Totally. Yes, definitely. I think so all of this, I think, falls under the umbrella of like basically things that we do to hold ourselves back. And I think that is kind of goes along with creating arbitrary rules in our business that we kind of like bind ourselves to, that or taking a rule that somebody else gave us, like some expert somewhere said blah, blah, blah. And it's not even necessarily that this expert's advice is wrong, but that we have like so harshly applied it to our business that we can never break that rule. And I think that's a huge thing too, is that like I think we hold on to those rules really tightly because running a business is scary, and being the boss and sort of admitting that we can just make any decision that we want because it is our business and that's how it goes. Right. Like that's a really scary thought. So you kind of put up rules in your business to help you give you a sense of like, okay, this is boundaries. This is how I operate. These things aren't bad, right? Like these things are fine, but we can often decide to not take a next step in business because we've made a rule that, you know, I can't sell in wholesale until I have XYZ happening, or I can't sell in wholesale because my product doesn't work that way, right? And maybe your product could work that way. You have just decided your product only looks like this, you know? And so you kind of just like refuse to change it in the slightest or adapt at all, or try to find a way to make wholesale work for you because you've already decided no to that. Does that make sense, Isaac? Or
Yeah. I would love to know if anybody watching has ever encountered some sort of expert or guru that said something, made some statement that realized was absolutely not true for them in their business.
Or that they held onto too tightly and said, made it so that they couldn't really function. I think it happens a lot in social media with that stuff. Is like, I have to post this many times a day or I shouldn't do it at all. And it's like, oh, no. Stop it.
Yeah. It was like the first time they came out and said, oh, well, the best time to send an email newsletter is Wednesday between 10 and noon. And then suddenly everybody was sending it then and your inboxes were flooded. And
yeah. And then now it's like the worst time to send it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So according to this poll that we have, this very unscientific poll is boo to music. Boo to music.
I have to say I'm the one person who voted yes.
Oh.
So that's fine. I'll keep my music to the podcast.
Alrighty. Okay, so we do have a question in here. Everyone says, sorry, let me get to that. I did that with Indie Retail Academy and talking to other retailers, sending really personal emails. I find them hard to send, so it kept me from sending any emails at all. It's so true, right? Like and I think that is like a style thing and not a rule thing too, is that like somebody has found what works for them and a style that works for them, right? And that doesn't have to be a rule. You can definitely still be successful in wholesale without sending, without chatting people up and, like you said, doing this personal thing that is just not part of your style at all. So yeah, don't let that be the thing that keeps you from sending an email because somebody else sends it a different way and has found success in that. So, okay. So Katie is asking, I make hand sewn or wool felt soft toys, and I'm wondering how I can calculate my prices, taking into consideration how much time I spend sewing each piece's details and the raw materials needed to produce it. Thanks. Isaac.
Oh boy. Sorry, I was just trying to dig up some links because I knew that this was coming. There are a lot of formulas out there floating around on how to price your products. The thing is, no one formula is right. And coincidentally, last month's theme was money matters. And in the 2 episodes of the podcast, one was all about pricing and the other was all about knowing your numbers in your business. So I'm going to throw links up in the chat for those episodes 11 and 12 of the podcast. In episode 11, I interviewed Kristen Pumphrey from PF Candle Co. about how she, sorry, the link's not working here. Hold on a second. How she prices her products, which is a very different model than Tina Rodas, who I interviewed in episode 13, who also shares her pricing strategy. Neither of those is right for you, but the info that they share and the way that we talk about, sorry, I'm trying to multitask. I've got to get better at that. The way that we talk, the things we talk about related to knowing your numbers and why that's important and how you should approach your pricing, especially around paying yourself and having a profit on top of that, is huge. So check out those episodes for a little more insight on the pricing quandary.
And so I would say that, like, basically whatever you have to do to sort of figure that out, there's people that just literally take a timer and time themselves doing different activities, batching things, and making sure that, they average out how long it took them to, make 5 of something, right? Or whatever the next time you're kind of doing these tasks. I think what's important is to consider and ask yourself, what does your process look like? First of all, before you start asking that question, a step back is to think about your process. And is your process much more one of a kind? Because that's going to be a different pricing structure than if your process is something where you can create, where you can do something in more of a production style, where you're, today I am hand sewn wool felt soft toys. Okay. So today I am cutting everything. Tomorrow I am sewing everything. The next day I'm stuffing everything, or whatever, whatever your process breaks down to. I would think about that too. And if you're, the raw materials needing to produce it, I think all of that pricing, if you're creating the raw materials, I think that is also going into paying yourself too. Also thinking about, which Tina, I think maybe even brings up, making sure that when you're paying yourself, you're paying enough in those hourly. So paying yourself is different from profit, right? What you're paying yourself to make it is not the same as I made profit on this, right? That is just paying for your time. And so when you pay yourself for your time, you don't need to necessarily price yourself super high end. Think about what would I actually pay somebody if this was not me to do it? And that is usually more in a production mindset. If you're doing more one of a kind and more art stuff, definitely like you can think about pricing it more like an artist, and less like, production. But if you have to think about, you have to pay enough so that at some point you might be giving this to somebody else. So what is going to at least entice them or make it so that they can grow into that position? So say you're paying yourself $15 an hour, but you hire somebody to do it and you have to train them and all of that. So maybe you're starting them at 12, and that gives you a buffer in there so that, you can kind of wait until they get as good as you were at 15 an hour, if that makes sense. And I'm throwing out random numbers here. Like, I don't want to assume how much you pay, but I feel like production work often is in the 12 to 20 something range. And if you're paying yourself more than that, you're usually thinking about your product in more of like an artist category.
Yeah. I remember, Sharon, we had a consulting call last month with a maker who was asking a similar question about pricing her work, especially because she was using, I'm trying to remember, please fill in the cracks if I'm forgetting, but she was trying to figure out how many pieces she could get out of X amount of material. And we were trying to extrapolate that and say, okay, well, what's the nearest round number of work that you can get out of X amount of material? How much does that amount cost, factoring in shipping and all that kind of stuff? And then divide that out so that you start to get a sense for how much it costs per piece to make. Now, again, if you're doing one of a kind stuff, that's harder to do. But you should be able to at least get a ballpark for how much material is going into your pieces, how much that material costs, and then divide that by your number of pieces that you're yielding out of that.
Yeah. And also remember too, like, you're probably doing other things in your business, like social media and shipping and other stuff too, that you usually don't take as part of your hourly for the making. That is usually stuff that's more built into an overhead of thinking about, thinking about the overhead that's combined with actually like the price of your product and stuff like that. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And definitely, like, if you had to choose one episode out of those two that I posted, choose episode 12, because Tina also goes into her pricing strategy and how she's factored out like what her annual business expenses are overhead wise based on her tax returns, and then divided that up on I think she even went down to like by the hour or by the minute, I think, of expenses. Like, basically you take the total amount that you spend on per year on a business and then divide that by the number of work hours or work minutes. And then you can apply that to your cost to be able to account for that in your products, in your product pricing. It's very fascinating. She's very brilliant in how she set all that up. And I would definitely recommend that.
And again, that is one way to do it.
Right. You don't have to.
You do not have to take the Tina Rodas way of doing things if it does not work for you. Okay. So, and I will also add, which is in the green button below this video, is our holiday shape up series starts with knowing your numbers and figuring out all of that stuff, along with our Jumpstart Your Handmade Business program. Both of those programs take you in a deep dive into your numbers to start thinking about how much you're making, how it's sustainable, what you need to do. And especially the holiday game plan is very, very much geared towards figuring out your level of production and what that nets you with the holiday season. And you can kind of play with those numbers and figure out what you need to do to like get certain outputs and what certain outputs happen when you do certain things in your business. So I would definitely encourage that.
This is the part where I would get really nerdy about the spreadsheet I created and the resources for that, but I'm going to just leave that there and restrain myself a little bit.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Because we are wrapping it up here. We're trying to make this under an hour in the 30-minute range.
How did we already pass 30 minutes?
I
Last
know.
time I looked, it was like quarter after.
I know. It was like, oh, we got to fill stuff. It's because we just talked so much about that question. We had a lot to say about it.
We could go on and on and on about pricing.
Yes. Yes, we definitely can. All right. If you are registered for this on Crowdcast, you're registered for the next one. So you'll get a reminder that this is going to happen next week as well, too. So we will see you back here. If you are on Facebook, I would really suggest you going over to our Crowdcast, which should be, I think, linked in there somehow. And also making sure that you're signed up for all of this, too. So, and ask any questions ahead of time you want as well, too. Check out if you are struggling at all with getting everything done for the holidays. Click the link below for the holiday help. We have 3 different resources for you that are coming up as well, or 2 resources that are coming up and 1 that is evergreen. So you guys will need to get on that. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, you guys, and we'll see you back here next week.
Sounds good. Until next time.
Press the wrong button. All right. Bye, guys.